on with the treatment of women's health, so it's kind of nice that we get to stay along the same topic. Duan is a disease that afflicts women who haven't followed the traditional postpartum practices in northern Thailand. My PhD research was on medicinal plants for memory loss, and so when I started talking to the traditional healers about gender differences in memory loss and which gender tended to have this affect them more when they reached the elderly age, they said that women did, and this was the reason why, was because women weren't following these traditional postpartum practices, and that was affecting them as they got older and giving them memory issues. So one thing that I wondered about was whether or not this was a culturally specific illness. I found that there are a lot of other cultures that actually have similar postpartum practices, but I wasn't aware of any cultures where there was a specific disease that happened because they didn't follow these postpartum practices. I'd be really interested if anybody knows of anything like that, because I did find this so fascinating when I was doing my research. And the woman to the left in the photograph, she's of the Karen Hill tribe, which is up in the mountains of Chiang Mai, where I did my research, and she had heard of the disease, even though she was of a different ethnic population than the people that I interviewed. So that kind of cultural crossover is interesting to me. All right, so some of the practices that a woman is required or requested to do after she has a child, it's called Yuu Fai, which means stay month in Thai. And it's basically a time for the woman to rest her body and her spirit. And she's supposed to stay inside the house for 1 month, oftentimes in a room with a small fire and the child. Depending on the sex of the child, the amount of time that she stays inside is different. So if it's a girl child, she actually gets to stay inside a little bit longer, because the Thai people believe that women's lives are a little bit more difficult than men's lives if they work a little bit harder. So they get that little extra time with mom right at the beginning of life, just to make sure that they've got the power for the rest of their lives. They keep their body covered, so cover your head, long sleeves, long pants, and gloves, and this is even when it's like very, very hot there. So keeping the body covered, keeping the body warm, not drinking cold water or bathing in cold water. There are dietary restrictions. It's also important to keep strong smells away from a new mother. And then also there's the binding of the abdomen, which is to try to help keep the womb back in place after childbirth, as well as help it to return to the normal size. So one of the plants that's often used here is Wan Chak Mot Luk. Interestingly, it is shaped like a woman's womb, and it's often used for a woman after childbirth. So some of the dietary restrictions are only to take warm liquids, to take warming plants, so a lot of members of the ginger family are used. Again, foods with a strong smell should be avoided. And then a couple of other things that I thought were interesting. They can only eat fish that have scales. And then they would also eat neutral foods like banana and rice, supplement that with some proteins like chicken and pork, but very bland, so not a whole lot of chilies, which is unusual for the Thai. And then also not to eat things like watermelon and gourds, because they're considered cooling foods, so trying to keep the body heat up. And then finally, there's a special yadong for women, which is, you can see on the left, yadong means pickled medicine. And so they'll take medicinal plants, they'll put them in Thai whiskey and let them sit for a little while. And then they'll give this to the woman after childbirth, but in very small glasses. They're not, they're not like cocktail size. They're very small glasses. And the belief is that the alcohol helps to distribute the medicinal plants into the body and also, again, keep the body warm. So another tradition that's part of postpartum practices is called Yuu Fai, or mother roasting. So some of this is done, in some areas it's done throughout the entire postpartum month. In other areas it's only done at the end of the postpartum month. So again, there's no bathing, so they'll use these hot compresses. They'll put them in warm water and put them on the woman's body, and sometimes they're a little bit rough, and that's just to get the medicinal plants into the skin and into the body. Also, they'll take a hot clay pot and roll it in the womb area, again, to get the uterus to come back to size and in the right place. And then there's the actual practice of mother roasting, which is the woman will lay on a bamboo bed with a special fire or a special wood that's used to build a smoldering fire underneath. She sits there for 5 hours every other day. And the whole idea of that, as well as the special chair with the herbs that burn underneath it, is to get the fluids out that happen the body after childbirth, it's hard to get all those fluids out. So they use this heat to kind of dry the woman out and get the fluid out. And then some cultures do, they'll do like sitz baths or vaginal steams after childbirth. But in the Thai culture, they actually make it a very dry, they'll burn the herbs and make them very dry so that it kind of dries out the womb as opposed to making them wet. So the knowledge base for my project was interviews with Thai traditional healers. And this was kind of an offshoot of my PhD research. So the interviews focused on plant remedies and herbal formulas with the potential to treat cognitive impairment in the elderly. We did forest and home garden walking interviews and plant collections to collect and identify the plants. I left this slide off of this presentation, but I will say all of the ethics of the International Society for Ethnobiology and the Society for Economic Botany were followed during this project. So a little bit about Thai traditional medicine very quickly. It's a bit of a mixture between Ayurvedic medicine and traditional Chinese medicine, and this is from the movement of people and religion throughout the area. So Thailand is primarily Buddhist. The branch of Buddhism that's practiced in Thailand originated in Sri Lanka and then moved from Sri Lanka through India into Thailand. And the religious people, or the monks, were allowed to carry with their few belongings medicinal plants and medicinal plant knowledge. So a lot of the plants and information that you find in Thai traditional medicine traveled with Buddhism through India, and then there was also a movement of people down from China, and so that was the influence of traditional Chinese medicine. So you'll find some crossover there between the plants used in traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic medicine and Thai traditional medicine. And similar to those two medical systems is the theory of elements in the body and balancing elements, keeping the elements balanced is a way to prevent illness and disease, and then also using medicinal plants, food, and lifestyle choices to make sure that your elements remain balanced. So cognitive decline in Thai traditional medicine is due to a disturbance in the wind element. It's because of all conditions affecting the nervous or neurological system in the brain. And Longpit Duan is caused by a stagnant or bad wind in women. So it's also considered a wind disorder in Thai traditional medicine. Some of the symptoms are the woman can be clumsy, she can be weak inside, she can have a prolapsed uterus. So the massage on the left is a woman doing an abdominal massage to put the uterus back into place after childbirth if it's kind of been knocked out of place. They can have headaches and migraines, bad hearing, stiff muscles, and then finally memory loss, which is kind of how I got into this topic in the first place. And the symptoms can happen anywhere from 2 to 3 months after giving birth to, all of a sudden the woman is much older, and they said if she smelled something bad during this period that she was supposed to be inside, that if she smells it again when she's older, that all of a sudden the symptoms can happen again just because of the smell, which I think is pretty fascinating. So treatment with multi-plant herbal formulas is very common in Thai traditional medicine. So when I was asking about plant use, it all came to me very, very infrequently. Did somebody tell me about a single plant? So most of it were these formulas. And the formulas include a plant that is like the most active plant in the formula, and then it also includes plants that are supported plants as well as plants for the individual. So you may be given a formula and somebody else with the same disease will be given a formula with different plants, somewhat different plants in it because of their individual makeup. So I received 3 formulas for Longpit Duan, each including about 15 to 17 different plants. And so after looking at all these formulas that I received for all these different disorders when I was doing my work in Thailand, I noticed that sometimes the plants were the same, and sometimes they were different. And I got kind of, this kind of intrigued me, and I wondered what the overlap in these formulas was. And so I did a really simple analysis. It's called the Jacquard Similarity Coefficient, and it's usually used for ecological studies where you're looking at the presence and absence of species in different areas. And so instead I looked at the presence and absence of different species in these formulas. I think that there could be some more complex analyses to do, so if you have suggestions, please let me know. I'd be interested to see what happens. So just looking at this Jacquard Similarity Coefficient, I found that the percent overlap, these are all the formulas just specifically for Longpit Duan. And I found that the percent overlap between the two formulas, one from healer T and one from healer I, was about 36%. And then that formula overlapped with the final formula that I received, only about 32%. So then I wanted to look at how these formulas for Duan also overlap with formulas for memory, as well as some of the other kind of culturally specific diseases that I heard about while I was doing my research. They're all based in wind. They're all wind disorders, so they do have some similar ideology, and therefore I assumed similar plants that were used. And so Duan and memory, the formulas overlap the most. So that was at about 25%. So in conclusion, when I looked at the plants that were actually overlapping, I found that in the majority of the time there were these groups of plants. And so you would go to the healer and say, okay, which plants are in this formula? And he would say, okay, you're going to put 5 of the TNs in, and you're going to put Kisorn Pangao is actually the 9 flowers. So there are 9 of them, or there are 5 of them. So you'd say, okay, you either put in the Kisorn Pangao or Kisorn Pangha, and then depending on that, you would know which species to put in there. So I found that the majority of the overlap was actually in these groups of plants. And most primarily for the Duan were the 5 spices. And the 5 spices, let me see if I turned on this food. Okay, so it's almost my last slide. So the 5 spices, actually the legend is that there were 6 holy men that were trying to find medicinal plants in the area. And so what they did is they all went out, and 5 of them found these medicinal plants, and there were these 5 spices. And then the 6th one combined all of them and said, I'm going to combine them all and make these 5 plants stronger. And so this 5 spices is kind of a commonly used group of plants to treat, just general health ailments, improve your sleep, improve your appetite, things like that. So I found that's where the majority of the overlap was, as well as the fact that there were most of the overlap plants were in the Zangaracea and the Piperaceae family, and that makes me think that they've got perceived warming properties. So that could be why that was. So I just wanted to say thank you to my PhD advisory committee, my collaborators in Thailand, my research assistant and botanical collaborator who helped identify plants for me, the Phibbs Conservatory Botany and Action Fellowship, and all of the Thai healers who contributed to my research. And I just returned from Thailand to return my research results. And one of the Thai healers, when I said thank you to him, he said, well, you not only have to thank me, but you have to thank my ancestors, and you have to thank the spirits of the forest. So I want to make sure that I also thank them. Thanks for your time, and if you have any questions.
Happy to dismiss you? Yeah, okay. Sorry, thank you very much. Just a little thing in between, just so a familiar new face here. Questions? We'll keep it short because we suddenly have a lost child. Any questions? I'm sorry, I may have interrupted the flow of thought of everyone.